Thank you very much, Alaska and Corla. And just at the outset, I want to join with colleagues earlier in expressing my condolences in the passing of Micheál McCarthy and also Tommy Gorman. A very sad day for Ireland to see two such wonderful people pass away, and people who made an enormous contribution to our society in so many different ways. I'll be supporting the EU Migration and Asylum Pact, supporting it and voting for it tomorrow. In the short time I have, I really just want to make a few points. One point picking up on what Deputy Stanton said. I really think people involved in this debate underestimate the extent to which it is push factors that cause people to migrate in a way that is irregular or in some cases illegal. And we shouldn't underestimate that. We see, for example, the United Kingdom decided to leave the European Union to take control of its borders, decided to introduce in their official policy a hostile environment for migration, made it their official policy to reduce both legal and illegal immigration. What we see happening so far in the UK this year, record numbers of people arriving in small boats from continental Europe to the United Kingdom. Why is that happening? Record numbers of asylum seekers arriving across the Mediterranean into Italy, despite the fact that a far-right or radical right government was elected there, and despite the fact that we here in Ireland can no longer provide accommodation for asylum seekers, 2,000 or so now unaccommodated, welfare payments cut back, the regime being tightened and hardened, quite frankly. We see record numbers arriving as well. It's not because Ireland or Britain or Europe or any country is some sort of a soft touch. It's not the case that governments are bringing people into our countries. They're being pushed out. They're being pushed out by war, by famine, by poverty, by oppression, by discrimination, because their group in society has been on the wrong side of the government or the wrong side of the winning side in a war. And I think we need to appreciate that more fully. Of course, the majority of them are men travelling on their own. These are people who have to risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean or perhaps the Sahara. Of course, it's going to be the case that most of them are men. They're the ones who are sent, or their families save up the money to allow them to make the journey. And of course, in many cases, they have families back home, wives and children and elderly relatives that they would like to be able to follow them in a few years' time after they've gained status, got a job and made some money. And we should know from our own experience, from Irish men going to Scotland as labourers, from Irish people crossing the Atlantic to live in America, that it was exactly a very similar process that we followed. In terms of the EU Migration Pact itself, I think it allows us to do some of the things that we need to do to better secure the outer borders of the European Union. If people can't enter Europe illegally or irregularly, it's going to be much harder for them to come here. That's a good thing. It will allow us to work together, 27 states, to combat people trafficking, those terrible criminal gangs that take money off people to put them in coffin ships and don't care whether they get to Europe or not, so long as they get their money. It allows us to work better on returns. People often say to me, when somebody's asylum application has failed, and most do fail, why don't they get sent home? As if it was that easy, as if they could be dropped out of a plane. You can't send somebody home who doesn't have documents. They need to get a passport from the country that you're going to send them to. You can't send them home unless that country has a returns agreement with you and is willing to take them. And we're in a much better position to negotiate returns agreements with countries that are relatively safe in the world. If we do that as a European Union of 27, we've much more negotiating power than Ireland would have going to these countries on our own, saying, can we have a returns agreement with you? The European Union has leverage, big budgets, trade agreements, and we have a much better chance of getting return agreements with countries of origin as part of the European Union. Another reason as well is returns to other parts of Europe. We know that maybe as many as a third of asylum seekers arriving in Ireland have already applied for or have some sort of status in another EU country. There's no requirement for them to take them back. We can ask, but no requirement for that to be the case. The EU Migration Pact can help change that and make it easier for returns to happen. And there's also the possibility, and I think it is something that has to be considered, is the European Union coming to agreements with transit countries, countries that people pass through on the way to Europe. They're not from there, but they pass through there on the way to Europe to process their applications there rather than here, which is, of course, a very different approach to the Rwanda policy. The fine thing I would say is that there are two big gaps, I think, in the EU's migration policy. The first is that we don't allow people to apply from where they are. Fewer people would come to Europe illegally if there was a means by which they could apply for asylum in their home countries, just like they apply for work permits or work visas.
Thank you.
And secondly, we need some form of green card system. We actually need more unskilled labour in the European Union. We don't just need people who have qualifications, we need people who have none. And there isn't a proper system for those people to come to Europe legally. Thank you.